From the drama-free true crime destination, where the most powerful stories take center stage, backed by pure facts and the absolute clarity you deserve. This is the main event. Georgia prosecutors admit they don't know how a woman allegedly killed a 4-year-old child found in the trunk of a car at a Sam's Club. In Las Vegas, a woman refers to herself as a nurse at a sentencing for lying about being a nurse. In Michigan, a woman who dreamed of a nice backyard while planning a deadly home invasion will have to settle for a prison yard. And in North Carolina, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty for 3 women accused of torturing and killing a 6-year-old girl. I'm Ernest Bethea, the last outlaw. This is the main event. A Georgia judge is weighing whether to dismiss charges against a woman accused of killing a 4-year-old girl after prosecutors admitted they don't know exactly how the child died. 37-year-old Jessica Motez has pleaded not guilty to felony murder, malice murder, aggravated battery, and concealing a death after 4-year-old Autumn Fox was found dead inside a car parked at Sam's Club and registered in the defendant's name. In their indictment, prosecutors said that Autumn died from blunt force trauma by means unknown and exposure to drugs including fentanyl, methamphetamine, and xylazine, a veterinary tranquilizer. Motez's attorney, Melinda Riles, argued at a hearing on Friday that the indictment should be dismissed because it fails to identify exactly how the child was killed or how Motez allegedly contributed to her death. Examples of more descriptive use of force and their causation of death include: the person suffered blunt force trauma to her colon when the defendant, by means of his fists, hit the victim in their torso with such force causing the colon to rupture, and said rupture causing the death of the victim. The victim suffered a blow to the head by means of a baseball bat when the defendant struck the victim with said object, causing the brain to swell, causing the death of the victim. The victim suffered a blow to the head by means of a hammer when the defendant struck the victim with said object, causing the brain to bleed, causing the death of the victim. Similarly, Riles said that merely saying the child was exposed to drugs didn't give Motez enough information to mount a proper defense. Did this defendant leave drugs lying about the house to where the child could accidentally ingest the drugs? Did she herself inject the child with drugs? There are so many ways with that are just, you can't be prepared to defend every single way with the word exposure, Riles said. Prosecutor Harold Buckler said the indictment lacks specificity because the information simply doesn't exist. If the state believed that this child died of a brain hemorrhage, we would have alleged that, he said. I anticipate, Your Honor, that when our medical examiner takes the stand, she's going to testify that the child died as a result of, in her words, blunt force trauma and exposure to these drugs. Buckler conceded that the indictment was unusual because of its vague wording. I guess I kind of struggle over this week trying to figure out that it's just seems entirely, wholly, and totally unfair to Miss Motez, especially given the fact we're trying to execute her as a result of what she's done, Buckler said. But, he said, the prosecution is limited by the indictment just as much as the defendant. At trial, Judge, we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this is unknown. Riles' motion also noted that the prosecutors failed to include the word unlawfully in the indictment when they wrote that Motez did, with malice aforethought, cause the death of Autumn Fox. That omission, Riles argued, should void the indictment. Judge Lindsay Burton says she would take the case under advisement. Motez is due back in court on September 4th when her defense will argue a challenge to the grand jury. A woman who falsely claimed she was a nurse while running a clinic for children with diabetes continued to refer to herself as a nurse at her sentencing. Crystal Scott said at her sentencing on Wednesday, "I became a nurse and diabetes educator, and I spent much of my life caring for people during the most vulnerable moments of their lives." Scott was never licensed as a nurse in Nevada or any other state and never passed any licensing exams to become one, according to her attorney, who confirmed this when the judge asked. Scott pleaded guilty to felony charges of nursing without a license and forgery. The charges filed in 2025 stemmed from a nurse in the Clark County School District who noticed discrepancies in medical orders for some children with diabetes. This was not a one-time incident, Prosecutor Dina Renetti said Wednesday. This was an ongoing fraud that endangered the lives of many, many children. She held herself out as a nurse and practiced without a license and took in our most vulnerable children. Scott's attorney Jack Buchanan said the crime began when the defendant left the doctor's office where she had been working. When she left the office, she lost her way, he said. Scott contacted children she had counseled for diabetes at the doctor's office, telling them she was starting her own clinic and inviting them to transfer care to her new office. What we thought was finally finding a medical professional who cared was actually finding a woman who was exploiting our desperate need to keep our chronically ill child alive, Tia Stanfield, a parent of one of the victims, said this in court on Wednesday. This plea feels like a miscarriage of justice. This case is not about fraud. It is about the calculated exploitation of chronically ill children and terrified parents. It's about violating the sacred trust families put in medical providers. It is about children's lives for personal gain. Investigators said there were 12 children, ages 5 to 14, identified as victims in the case. The level of fraud in this case is outstanding, Renetti said, explaining that Scott assumed the identity of a real nurse with the same name in Las Vegas. "I want to begin by saying that I'm deeply sorry to be standing before the court today. I understand the seriousness of the charges before me, and I understand that my actions and decisions have consequences," Scott said in a statement to the court. "I have thought about this every minute of every single day since this happened." But prosecutors said that wasn't true, noting that days after her arraignment, Scott flew to Albania with her family and posted photos on social media using the hashtags moving abroad and expat life. "I had people through this State Department ready to snatch her up if she failed to appear for her next court date," Renetti said. Buchanan urged Judge Danielle Piper to send Scott to probation, noting there was no evidence that a child was misdiagnosed, that a child was misprescribed, and that a child was misoverdosed on insulin. "It's not only she didn't hurt people, but it sounds like what she was doing was potentially helping these children, helping them go to school," Buchanan added. That rationale didn't sit well with Allison Anderson, the mother of a victim. "She could have killed children. To say that no kids were harmed in this was vastly untrue. As somebody very knowledgeable in type 1 diabetes, if you have sustained blood sugars, it eats your body, and these kids are likely to have trouble having babies, strokes, amputations. To say that these kids aren't harmed, we will find out later in their lives what harm has been done." Piper sided with prosecutors and sentenced Scott to serve concurrent sentences of 19 to 48 months. "Put your hands behind your back. You're going to prison," Piper said before adjourning the hearing. A Michigan judge told a woman who admitted her role in a deadly home invasion, "You were all in on this." 34-year-old Amanda Hernandez learned her fate on Wednesday after pleading no contest to conspiracy to commit first-degree home invasion, conspiracy to commit false personation of a public utility worker, and accessory after the fact to a felony. The charges came in connection with the home invasion and murder of 72-year-old Hussein Sam Murray on October 11, 2024, when Amanda Hernandez's husband, 40-year-old Carlos Hernandez, and 41-year-old Joshua Zuazo posed as gas company employees and entered Murray's home. Prosecutors said the text sent by Amanda Hernandez to her husband proved that she was involved in the planning of the home invasion. The Hernandezes exchanged nearly 100 text messages in which they allegedly talked about how the scheme would unfold the day before Murray's murder. Prosecutors presented these texts during trial, which were also obtained by local NBC affiliate WDIV. Among the messages were an alleged confirmation from Amanda Hernandez that the fake DTE badges were delivered, a reminder to turn your phone off when you're out there just in case, relief that the men had a good getaway car, and another reminder to make sure there was no cameras around. The couple also allegedly talked about what they would buy with the money the two men would steal from the Murrays, including enough money to buy a house. Amanda Hernandez allegedly longed for a home with no rent, adding, "We can have a nice backyard." Those texts were brought up during Amanda Hernandez's sentencing hearing, as Murray's wife and son spoke to the court before the sentence was handed down. Linda Murray, Murray's wife, who was also attacked during the home invasion, she was restrained on the upper floor of the house while her husband was being beaten to death by Carlos Hernandez and Zuazo in the basement. Linda Murray addressed Amanda Hernandez directly, saying, "Amanda, maybe instead of looking for the easy way to get a house with a big yard, if you and your husband had worked as hard as my husband did, you might have had one without planning to rob us and getting my husband killed." Before handing out her sentence, Oakland County Circuit Court Judge Nancy Grant revisited the text and told Amanda Hernandez, "You are not an innocent victim. You were all in on this." According to online court records, Grant sentenced Amanda Hernandez to 57 months to 20 years in prison for conspiracy to commit first-degree home invasion, 1 to 5 years for accessory after the fact to a felony, and 1 to 2 years for conspiracy to commit false personation of a public utility worker. Amanda Hernandez received credit for 197 days served. Carlos Hernandez and Zuazo were both found guilty of murdering Murray and attacking his wife and sentenced to life in prison in December 2025. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty for 3 women accused of torturing and killing a 6-year-old girl. 52-year-old Tanya McKnight, 61-year-old Susan Robinson, and 23-year-old Taryn McKnight are charged with first-degree murder in the death of Dominique Moody and have all pled not guilty. A 911 call on December 16, 2025 reported that Dominique wasn't breathing. The child was pronounced dead hours after she was taken to a hospital. First responders who arrived at the property described a 3-bedroom home as extremely unkempt, with a strong odor of feces and urine, and noted that rats were visible running through the home. Animal and human feces were visible throughout the property, and there were holes in the floor and ceiling leading to the home's exterior. In court documents, detectives said the property had no central heating and was warmed by the kitchen oven and 2 space heaters. The low temperature on the day Dominique died was 20 degrees. The child's body, hair, and nails were dirty, and officers noted open wounds and scarring in various stages of healing covering most of her body. At 6 years old, Dominique weighed just 27 pounds. The most significant injuries were defects to her genitalia and buttocks, investigators wrote in documents reviewed by Court TV, with those areas showing numerous fresh wounds. She also had wounds in various stages of healing on her upper thighs and hips, the document said. Investigators added that sitting on soiled items such as a diaper for extended periods caused injury and discoloration. An autopsy also revealed a heel fracture to Dominique's right pinky toe and lower rib fractures in various stages of healing on both her right and left sides. When detectives interviewed other children who lived in the home, They said that Dominique was forced to live in a small enclosure inside of the residence, often being bound with black tape and being struck with a white belt. The children further reported that when Dominique was found not breathing, she was placed in front of the kitchen stove to warm her up and bring her back to life. Investigators said Robinson admitted the child was forced to stay in a dog crate, which was found broken in the trash during a search of the home. Prosecutors have not revealed the defendants' relationship to each other or to Dominique beyond saying that Tanya McKnight was responsible for caring for the child. Robinson allegedly told police that Tanya McKnight regularly left the children in Robinson's care as well as Taryn McKnight's care. Detectives said that when they searched Robinson's phone, they saw communications with Tanya McKnight that included a photo showing the victim duct taped with black duct tape and her hands and feet swollen, lying on the carpeted area of the living room. The accompanying message allegedly said the child was being punished. Investigators said that Dominique suffered punishments for about a year and a half at a home that amounted to torture. Those punishments included being starved while being forced to watch other children eat, being imprisoned in a crate or a bathroom for days, and being bound, beaten, and duct taped. All three defendants are scheduled to return to court in November. Thank you so much for joining me here at the drama-free true crime destination. Please be sure to follow Bethea's Byte Reloaded all over social media and support the channel through PayPal and Cash App. You can get your true crime news right here with no gimmicks, no drama, and no BS. This is Bethea's Byte, and it's reloaded.